Nice.
Okay, I'm here with Omegon, a fellow YouTuber, and we're going to discuss Brexit, Britain's exit from the European Union. So, Omegon,
Yes.
thoughts on this issue?
Oh, I really hope we leave.
Absolutely. Honestly, I've had a lot of trouble. I know you have, and Griffiths has as well, finding anyone on YouTube willing to argue the Remain position.
Indeed.
And the only YouTuber I've seen do it, and I have to say he didn't do it very well. It's not to his usual standards. Was Dr. Mason Thunderfoot?
He did let himself down. His arguments were very self-serving, as we had previously discussed before. It
Hmm.
just seemed like he was only interested in himself, and that's something I've noticed in articles I have seen written by very liberal authors, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. One thing he did mention, which I agreed with at the time until I did a little more research onto it, was the whole policy thing. Like at the minute, every British company, even if they don't trade with Europe, has to comply with Europeans' trading laws. Europe's trading laws. And he said, if we leave Europe, we're going to have to draft a whole load of our own trading laws that all companies will have to follow. But the companies that trade with Europe, they'll still be applicable to their laws.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what to say to that.
Hmm.
Don't like the fact I linked to an article with the TTIP that there is an unelected head of that.
Yes, yes.
I don't. Somebody has all of that power and they answer to a commission. I'm sorry, that's it. Just doesn't sit with me. That person should be held accountable by the people. And unfortunately, with the EU being such a vast organization, it doesn't really work like that.
There is an unelected head of the European Union. There are several voted candidates that speak for every country, but the head honchos themselves aren't actually elected, and they are the highest paid politicians in the world, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how they can justify that.
It also makes you wonder if they can be considered politicians or CEOs. Because if
that's an
you're a
excellent point. Yeah.
politician, you're someone. Yeah, if you're a politician, you are held accountable by the people, whereas a CEO is not. It's a business-run thing, and you have to wonder if these people, if say we decide to stay, and we maybe, depending on the percentage, either get more involved or get a reform, which won't happen. Let's face it.
Hmm.
If we get more involved, then there are going to be a bunch of super politicians, CEOs, running what will be a massive state business, and
Exactly.
they won't be held
That,
accountable to anyone. People could say
exactly.
that they
Yeah.
will, but they won't.
Yeah, I mean, that was my big issue on the point is the zero accountability. I mean, they can pretty much get away with whatever they want to do with. If one
Plus,
country has a problem with how they're being screwed over, there are 27 other countries out there who say, what are you going to do about it?
you have to consider if they are not elected, whether or not this is a democracy or not. Because I don't believe if you are not elected into your position,
Yeah.
I do not believe it'll be a democracy.
Well, I mean, if that European centralized army that they've been theorizing comes out, then it will essentially be a dictatorship.
I would love to know how they would organize this, whether or not we'd have, like America, National Guard for each state, because America's a republic.
Hmm.
But I would wonder if we have that and then a mass army. I do wonder if there will be a draft installed to get those that, for example, are unemployed or unskilled into an area where they could be considered valuable to society again.
Yeah, to like almost like force a trade upon them, so they will become
Yes.
useful in some respect, even
It is a
afterwards.
concern. Maybe it's just scaremongery on my own part,
Well, I
but
mean, it's an
that's,
entirely plausible thing. I mean, there's no rules that say we can't theorize.
no. And unlike politicians with how they've been behaving, I'm not trying to scaremonger people. I am simply seeing it and assessing it with what I know.
Yeah, I mean, it has the potential there either way. That could happen because, like we said, I mean, these politicians aren't accountable to anybody. So who knows
Exactly.
where that will end?
Yes, it's disturbing, and the red tape, so much EU red tape. People think that we will lose money, we will lose jobs and business, forgetting that we've already been offered a massive opportunity already outside the EU that we could not get because of the red tape binding us to the
Yeah,
EU.
so much bureaucracy. You see, that's an argument I've heard time and time again from the Remain campaign, and that's if we leave Europe, we're going to have to pay through the arse in fines, uh, not fines, sorry, like taxes for trading with Europe.
Yeah.
But what they fail to realize is anybody outside Europe that tries to trade with us, they have to face those same levies, those same fees and fines.
Yeah.
But if we left that, we're leaving one stagnant, broken economy and opening up the rest of the world that won't be paying those fees to trade with us.
Yes. There is an equal concern with, for example, we have already had the scaremongering of the Conservatives indicating there will be an emergency budget, which obviously there'll have to be a new budget if we decide to leave, because we have to take into account new factors that, well, are all uncertain, let's face it. But
Yeah.
also from the Bank of England that have been accused of scaremongery, with George Osborne threatening a 2p tax, income tax rise, which I guess adds up.
And it's worth noting that George Osborne's educational background is in, was it literature?
Journalism.
Oh, is it?
He has a degree, I believe, in journalism.
Yeah, which,
He's in charge
makes
of our money.
fucking Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's
This what
ridiculous.
annoys me about people with degrees in the sciences, if you will. If you have a math degree, you're less likely to get one in a bank than one with the humanities degree, simply because you've got better interpersonal skills if you're a humanitarian.
That's ridiculous.
Yes, but it's
Explains something about the economy, I suppose.
Yes, I guess so. Damn you, RBS.
Yeah.
Stop hiring creative writers.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Indeed.
But yeah, my thoughts behind the whole David Cameron voting to Remain and a lot of these big businessmen trying to scaremonger the Remain campaign is if we leave, it's going to become a lot harder for them to avoid tax by stashing their billions in offshore European bank accounts. There will be a lot of red tape to that. Whereas at the minute, they have a pretty sweet deal.
I'm not too sure. I think they can say what they want, but I think they'd still hide their money.
I imagine they would, yeah. They'll find a way around it, but it becomes a bit more of a headache.
One of the interesting things I've noticed on Prime Minister's questions, certainly with the interactions between previous government who are sat in the shadow cabinet, not in the shadow cabinet, but certainly backbenchers, and the current government, is they will always mention that while companies like Google and Starbucks are in fact paying a tax now, they were not during the Labour government. And they'll rub that in their face, but then you look at how much Google and Starbucks are paying, and it's unacceptable. It is too low. Whereas these companies are being brutally assaulted in countries like France. They're actually paying a lot more.
Yeah.
What is so damn important to the Conservative government, or even any other previous government, that they refuse to treat them or hold them to the same standards as others? What benefit is there to that government?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the companies negotiate their own sort of deals because they're such big contributors and big employers. They negotiate separate deals with the government and usually base their companies for trading in Britain in Ireland, which have a different set of trade rules, different set of taxes. Which that's why if you look up Google, if you live in Britain and you get paid something by Google, it says Google Ireland.
Yeah, I did notice something. I also, since we're talking about money, there is some scaremongery labels being applied to George Osborne after he was latching onto the recent IMF Brexit report by simply saying that if the UK left the EU, there was a possibility of already harming the prospects. I can read the quote. The IMF's warnings about our exit from the EU are stark. For the first time, we're seeing the direct impact of our economy on the risks of leaving the EU. If the British economy is hit by the mere risk of leaving the EU, you can imagine the hit to people's incomes and jobs if we actually did leave. The IMF has given us the clearest independent warning of the taste of bad things to come if Britain leaves the EU.
I saw an article like this in the BBC. I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those articles on the BBC. I've got about 7 linked. It's ridiculous. They've got an entire EU referendum page. It will be there.
It was so ridiculous because it was scaremongering and then completely demolished its own scaremonger about halfway down that article. The title was "The Pound is the weakest it's been against the dollar." I scroll down and it says it's the lowest it's been against the dollar in 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That's not news.
Oh, that's glorious. If you want to see how weak the dollar and the pound go back to the last recession. It should, obviously, there is a stability with the pound being stronger. However, you want to see real damage, go back.
Yeah, it's like 2008, the housing crisis, like the property crash.
It absolutely, the currencies all suffered.
So yeah, my thoughts with TTIP. America is negotiating a very closed doors trade contract with Europe. So President Barack Obama comes to Britain to try and convince people to stay within the EU and says, I do not support Britain leaving the European Union. It's bad for X amount of reasons. It's what I think, and this is just my theory, the reason he doesn't want Britain leaving the European Union is because they're going to a lot of effort to negotiate this trade deal with Europe. If Britain, one of the financial powerhouse, that is a massive slice of the pie that they're losing out on, they're going to have to negotiate a separate trade deal with us because Europe becomes a lot less appetizing if we're not in there.
You do have to consider that if the UK leaves the EU, there will be some obvious damage and discord and unsettlement within the EU. But
Absolutely,
there will not be anywhere near as much red tape to negotiate with the UK.
Well, you see that what you're talking about there, the problems that will hit Europe because of that, is just extra ammunition to say that they will negotiate trade deals with Britain, so we won't have to go through those same barriers international trade do.
Interesting point. If we are so important to Europe, why was the renegotiations so bad?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. David Cameron attempted to renegotiate Britain's position and absolutely failed, slinked back to Britain with his tail between his legs, and is now saying, if we remain, I will renegotiate the position. How? You failed before. What makes this time any different?
I, using some other YouTubers' logic, put out a question on Twitter where I said, if we vote to stay in the EU, will we actually get EU reform, or will the EU fuck us? No one said reform.
I think the latter on that one, to be honest.
So do I. I do not see, if the vote is as close as we are being led to believe, and we vote to stay, are they going to try and integrate us further, or are they going to renegotiate? And if we vote to leave, if it's really close, are they going to try and force a second vote, or are they going to adhere to what the majority of those eligible to vote that actually did vote said?
Yeah, it costs us so much fucking money for the privilege of getting screwed by Europe. In 2015, the UK's full membership fee would have been 17.8 billion. However, Britain doesn't pay that full fee. I imagine because part of it is refunded.
Rebates.
Yeah, rebates. So last year, the rebates made it 12.9 billion instead.
Which makes sense because we pay 250 million a week, not the 350 million we are being told we pay.
It works out around, with 12.9 billion, it works out at about 35 million a day.
I am curious about the last time the UK was demanded to pay 1 point something billion. I don't know what it was for, though, because I was led to believe it was to prop up the EU's deficit.
It was probably to bail out
I think
Greek banks or something.
I'm pretty sure it was to do with the deficit that was brought about by a bailout from a fucking socialist nation.
Because we did pay, after all the rebates, we paid 12.9 billion, and about 2 billion was spent renovating a British town. But that still leaves us 10.9 billion.
When I hear 250 million pounds a week, which is basically the number, and I look at the housing problems we have where I live, and yes, they're building some houses in an area, but the fact remains there are people who are having children still having to live at home with their parents in their late 20s. And it's because even though they're considered high priority, the council has nothing for them. Even though
we're the houses, they just don't have the houses.
With 250 million pounds a week, I'm sorry, yes, okay, that would stimulate growth in the housing market. That would actually benefit our people.
That can be put anywhere. I mean, not just the housing market, but the NHS is coming apart at the seams.
It is, and it's because every time a government comes in, they always mess with it and sell bits off.
Yeah.
Sorry, please stop doing that. That's not EU related, though. But I know that our model, our health system model, is quite appealing to those in other nations that don't have it.
Yeah, yeah.
If we integrated, they would certainly get the full advantages of it, which would be stretched thin. But the housing problem, you could really fix that with that money. That seems selfish, but there are so many people who are struggling.
Absolutely, socialized housing is needed. I'm not a fan of too many socialized services, but housing is one that is absolutely needed. It's one of those things that you cannot go without.
Yeah, I agree. And housing is well, we spend our lives building houses, and well, we don't have enough anymore.
I mean, it's worth noting to anybody watching, I mean, to some of the American viewers maybe, that housing here is incredibly expensive. It's some of the most expensive in the world. For example, in my area alone, a studio flat which hasn't got like a bedroom, it's like a living room slash bedroom in one room, a kitchen and a bathroom, and that's it, will cost you about £650 a month, which is about, I'd say, $1,000 to $1,100.
Okay, I can counter, not raise it by too much. I live by the coast, and coastal areas are considered quite desirable. The
Hmm.
A regular three-bedroom house on private, so private's tenancy, is £750 for a three-bedroom house. These are mid-terraced houses. They're really shoddy at best. You
Hmm.
go to townhouses in the town centres. They're usually the old-fashioned townhouses with basements. They can go for up to 1,200 a month.
Well, I can imagine those houses are usually beautiful.
They are. They're stunning, and I've
Yeah,
been in
anything on
quite a
mid
number of them.
terrace with neighbours knocking on the walls each side,
Yeah.
it's not going to be fun. And this
No,
is like, 650 for a flat that hasn't even got its own bedroom that overlooks the fucking sanitary works or something.
I assume you were talking about private as well.
Oh
Yes,
yeah, obviously
because
private
uh,
sector.
obviously the council properties are the social housing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
They
yeah,
have, but
that's
they have a benchmark. They cannot go over a certain point, depending on area, though.
hmm. Well, I mean, it's worth noting that around my area, anyway, the social housing register has like a 12-year waiting list.
Wow.
Yeah,
My sister has been on one for 2.5 years, and she's about to
blimey,
have a second child, and she's still not housed.
bloody hell, it's crazy. It's
It is.
ridiculous.
But then more children are being raised into this situation, and there are lots of people who are overworked and underpaid who
Hmm.
cannot get anywhere without shared accommodation, which is becoming more popular because the cost of living is not matching the inflation.
Yeah, the wage is so far below the living wage, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Which actually brings us into the next point I wanted to raise, which is unemployment in general. We have all these problems, a housing deficit for one, and we are still constantly funneling in more and more people from Europe to fill jobs that could be filled with the indigenous British people.
Yes. I have a number of gripes with this, being someone who, and I'm quite happy to say this, I was forced into self employment through the system that was put in place to help, well, supposed long term unemployed, more because I could not get to any nearby town, only
Hmm.
to find out people who share my skills from mainland Europe could get bursaries to come here and
Yeah.
then get to work. I'm not 5 years ago that was available to me. It is not available now.
Well, it might annoy you even more to find out that employers, not only do the workers from Europe get up to £900 to pay for their travel to come here for an interview, if the employer chooses to employ that European over a British person, they get a £1,000 bonus per person they hire outside of the UK.
I used to work for a company called, and yes, grumble. I used to work for a company called Anovo, fixing mobile phones or cell phones, as they actually should be called. People in the comments, I don't care what you say, they should be called cell phones. I really do mean that. They connect to cell sites and they're divided up in a cell. Never mind. The majority of the workforce were Polish, and other small numbers of Eastern Europeans. And
Hmm.
they even mentioned when they got here, they were given, and this was 5 years ago, they were given assistance that, even though I was entitled to some of, I was not entitled to as much of.
Right.
And that bugged me. Like, I got a free bicycle because my job was 6 miles away from where I lived. Fine.
That's a hell
But
of a
that's
bicycle trip.
all I got. Yeah, but I don't mind. But they got assistance with rent I could not get. They got assistance with other various things that charities offered that would not offer me because I was considered low priority.
Yeah. But it just goes to show that anyone arguing for the Remain is obviously so detached from the struggles of people who work every day like me and you. I mean, I work with people in a very, very tough job in a vehicle where the driver of that vehicle is an Eastern European, and this is a 27-ton vehicle. This vehicle can kill people. And they drive like absolute lunatics. I've been in a vehicle with one of them, and he's gone the wrong way round a roundabout because they drive on the other side of the road in their country.
Oh dear.
And honestly, I don't know how people haven't died. I mean, maybe people have died. I know that one of my work colleagues was crushed by one of the 27-ton lorries and still in hospital because the drivers are to such a poor standard. Because I've had, I mean, I know this is all anecdotal. I can't present any evidence for what I'm saying, but, you know, 'cause it's a word of mouth.
I can add some fact to the unemployment numbers. They are very low at the moment. However, and people who say this, oh, but unemployment's low, you seem to forget when a conservative government comes into power, they relax employment law. And this is a killer. You get 0-hour contracts on the rise. People get part-time jobs at best and have to get more than one. If you get one, you're lucky. Get two, you're basically praying to somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm quite lucky to have a full-time job that pays reasonably well, even though it's, you know, making my body disintegrate around me. But
yeah, I mean, my hourly rate is really good, but I don't have enough hours to make it up, and I work on my own. I don't have, which sucks really, but it is the price you pay for being in an undesirable location and being still even now considered low priority for any help that is given to other people who come here willingly, which, of course, if you desperately need help or you are a skilled worker in a craft I'm not skilled in, like dentists, it turns out we Brits actually do like our teeth, but we don't have enough dentists. And the UK dental system is a whole different problem.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, oh, how come Britons are stereotyped as having bad teeth when you have socialised healthcare? That doesn't include dental.
No, it does not, and that is a rant for another time.
Yeah,
I promise you, I've done an entire 30-minute video on this. I could have teal-deered the bloody thing.
Oh, God almighty.
Oh, but there are a lot of jobs available that are not skilled, are not certainly like dentist, that are available that are being given to people purely with incentive and not to people who are here that are struggling and are still struggling or are not regarded as worth it.
Yeah.
That's simple. Have you been to a job centre? It is the single most.
I have been. Oh, God.
I spent of my 14 years as an adult, 7 years going to them, and I can't do it again. I can't understand how people can do it for a month without wanting to drink themselves to death or cut themselves.
I went to the job centre. I was on what do you call it? Job seekers allowance for 6 months, and
you JSA,
it's the most depressing. It sucks the life out of you. That place. It's the most depressing hole. It's like feeding time at the zoo. The wildlife that congregate there. It's awful.
Yeah, they do. And then you hear one of us speak around people who are typically there, and you think, I'm going to get beaten up when I leave.
Yeah, you think you're going to get mugged for your trainers or something.
Where I live, it's a case of that Russian guy who's clearly here for work is going to bottle me when I leave.
Yeah.
He's getting more benefits than I am. I know he is.
It just goes to show with the unemployment rates. All right, I won't go earlier than 1945 because we were still in that World War II thing. So obviously that would skew the statistics quite rapidly because Germany were bombing our infrastructure. Yeah, so 1945 to 1972, the unemployment rate in Britain peaked at 3.6%. That was the most unemployed there were at all. In 1972, Britain joined the European Union, which is at the time called the Common Market. It was only designed for trade. It had no intention of becoming a political union. But between 1973 and today, the unemployment rate has peaked at 16%. The unemployment rate very rarely drops down to what it peaked at between 1945 and 1972, which, should raise a red flag anyway.
Indeed. I have nothing to add to that. It is a red flag.
Yeah. And considering the problem's only going to get worse, we're bringing in more and more people. Those people are obviously going to make lives for themselves, have children. Obviously, the people here already are going to have children. They're not going to be able to save up enough money to retire as Spain like the older generation have because jobs are so hard to come by. The job market is now so diluted, it's become an employer's market rather than an employee's market. They can pay low wages, treat workers like shit, and if the workers don't like it and give that company a bad name, they can fire them and have 5 more ready to do their job at, the click of the fingers.
This is the relaxed employment thing again, and in fact, where I last worked, the company was renowned for hiring and firing, and they did it in the droves. I'm not even kidding. I survived 2 years and got to a position of power and just got and lost my job purely by accident on a laying off problem due to losses of contracts. But this also brings up the interesting point of, if we leave, do these people stay and become citizens? And what about socialized housing? Because if more people are coming here, where do they go?
Yeah, I mean,
A lot of these people are getting preferential treatment for housing, and we have, I believe, in my area, they're going to be building near Dover about 4,000 houses, which is all well and good, but are you going to give housing to those who are struggling here first, or are you just going to give them to supposed refugees?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like all preferential treatment goes to those who come from overseas, and the indigenous people are forgotten about.
Yes. You have to be concerned also. Oh, actually, on a slight tangent, there are people who are here that can't be deported because of EU rules. If we're no longer bound to those rules, those people can go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're keeping them in like immigration centres and sometimes even prisons.
Some are in houses with full benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't know how credible the article I read was, but some things said that we were also putting them up in like travel lodges.
There are some single mothers, I believe, who are actually staying in bed and breakfasts and travel lodges because they cannot afford the rent, or because there are no houses in their area or a suitable area. I know that when they changed the benefits, they moved a lot of families from London to places like Birmingham or Luton, and that was only because the cost of rent was low. And yeah, a lot of people are angry about this because of the rent costs being so high, but at the same time, should the government be paying that much for those people to live in London? But then they counter that by keeping some people in London that shouldn't be there to begin with, because they're hateful people that somehow manage to abuse human rights and live in a really nice, big, expensive house while spouting how much they hate our democracy.
Well, again, it's the European courts.
Exactly.
Like, we couldn't deport the hate preacher because I don't know where he was being deported to. I think it was America, was it?
Yeah, I don't think it was Anjem Chowdhury. I think it was the guy with two hands that were hooks, and I think he has eventually gone. But it took, because of the EU's rules and human rights courts that they have there in Europe, we were tied up. We were hogtied.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we always are when it comes to legal matters
as well. To finally get rid of it, it costs millions. It's like, are you kidding me? Yet again, another thing that's costing us millions that could easily be spent on building a bloody house.
Well, I mean, for $1 million, I mean, considering the council owns the majority of the land anyway, the council only has to fund the material costs and the labour costs for building a house, which can be done with about £10,000. Houses aren't expensive to build. It's the land that costs the money.
They're not, certainly not expensive to cost now that we know how to build them and make them more efficient.
Exactly. I mean, considering it gets plastered with bricks anyway, you could build a timber-framed house and then coat that in bricks, and it is as sturdy as most other houses.
There is I was looking at properties in the United States, in certain states in America, and you can buy a house about 4 times the size of an average 3-bedroom mid-terrace property in the UK for about $147,000.
Right. I think, Omegon, it's time you and me head to the States.
I don't mind living in Georgia if I get to live in a house
anywhere
like
in America.
Quite frankly, I have to side with you. And for the first time in a while, I've seen people flying the St. George's Cross.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone's so terrified to be patriotic here.
Yeah, you can hang the Scottish flag outside and be proud to be Scottish. You can hang out the Northern Irish flag and be proud to be Northern Irish. And the Welsh flag, even though that's not really much of a country. But the English flag, you're racist!
Pretty much, it's gotten to that.
If we become a United States of Europe, which language is the dominant language?
Oh, British, for sure. Then again, I mean, Spanish is the second most popular global language, but if they try and change us...
But surely Germany would want some preferential treatment here. Crowd, you suck.
I imagine they would, but only because they've got Führer Merkel on their side.
I can't be dealing with Merkel. She's losing votes and support to the far right. And what does she do? She says, "I'm going to keep my open door policy."
That's why she's an idiot. I don't think anyone, even the people that voted for her originally, are arguing that at this point.
I I can't understand her.
Hmm.
You have such a thriving country, and you're like, oh, we'll need more workers. Okay, well, we have unemployment in the UK. Why don't you try and appeal to us to come there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Or
would, if you could make it appealing to me to go to your nation. You have potentially trained and skilled workers in the UK. Why not just appeal to them
yeah,
to
through the
come
same
to
medium, offer them a
you?
£1,000 bonus for getting a
Yeah.
job in Europe.
Hell, just offer them a lodge for a few months so they can save up some money to get a deposit on a place. That way, they then become their own sort of self-sufficient person and
Or
can
even offer
integrate with your
them the
culture.
£900 to come over and interview and then get set up
Mm.
in a rented place. You know,
I would
something.
gladly learn German and integrate with German culture, especially Oktoberfest, if I knew that they actually cared enough to look after me and help me integrate with within the country.
Absolutely. If if Europe treated Britons the way Britain treats Europeans, then I wouldn't be advocating so hard for them to leave, because then it would be a bit of give and take apart from just take.
Yeah, exactly. It just seems like we're being demands are being made of us to do this, this, this. It's like, well, okay, fair enough. The UK is considered. We certainly are held in a higher regard than other nations, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean we should lead by example or be
Yeah.
held to ransom because we disagree with something. David Cameron said that we lose our voice at a table, but clearly, based on recent renegotiations, our voice is like Tiny Tim.
Yeah, I mean, we have one voice in a sea of voices,
And also,
and no one listens to that voice because everybody hates us.
there was something mentioned about our oppositions to certain bills or legislations and them still going through anyway. I can't remember it. Oh, what was it?
I imagine that's most of them, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all well and good us having a voice, but there is evidence to support us having such a small voice that even with this supposed democracy, even though a lot of the EU Commission are not actually voted for or elected, we're not actually being heard.
But you see, that's the thing. We wouldn't have a voice in Europe, but whatever Europe does wouldn't affect us. We don't need to have a voice there because they can't impose their rules on us anymore.
That I'm okay with. I do not like the idea of being bullied into something.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to a certain extent. I quite like the idea of freedom. I know that there are some YouTubers out there who sit on the fence, and there are others who identify not as British but as European. There is one I know who does that, but he doesn't know why. Captain McCall. But I think us having our freedom and making our own minds up is more important than having some bureaucrats and unelected career politicians, CEOs, do it for us.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, our democratically elected government holds so little power, and it's power that's going to be eroded.
Yes.
To the point where we have a central governing European authority based in Brussels.
Yeah, there are a lot of people. Oh, yeah, that building is so expensive, and what for? There are a lot of people who I've seen engage on Facebook who are sat on the fence, but there are others who are older pensioners who are on Facebook. Honestly, they're there, and they're torn not because they're sat on the fence, but because they are concerned with how this affects the future generations, their grandchildren. And I have to admit, I am concerned for my nieces and my nephew, but I do not believe they benefit from the United Kingdom staying in the EU. I believe they will be worse off. And I have to consider their future because, well, I don't have kids. I have to regard my future generation as them.
Yeah, because at the minute, the job market is not fair for British people. I mean, people say, oh, well, how good can you be at your job if someone that doesn't speak the language can come over here and get your job off you? But that's not how it works.
Nope.
The company is offered £1,000 straight up as a bonus if they take this person on over this person. That is not a fair job market.
It's like affirmative action that totally discriminates against Brits.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
That's something done by the BBC where they discriminate based on race for applications.
And
you're adding nationalities to it now.
Who's going to pick a British worker if you can have a worker who can do the menial job just as well and an extra £1,000 in your pocket?
It is unacceptable. And I don't like it because I've struggled for so many years. Now finding out that I am being discriminated against by European policy and the UK's own ideas of what equality. It's not equal opportunity if someone else has been given an advantage.
It's not equality. You see, social justice warriors, this is what equality looks like. Right, I think that's about it.
If you are someone that would like to remain in the EU, don't hesitate to engage us in the comments, because we are more than willing to discuss this.
All of this was off the cuff from studies we have read. So yeah, if you see anything wrong, please do let us know. We'll be commenting and replying. So thanks for joining me and Omegon talking about Brexit. He's a fantastic YouTuber himself. You should go and check him out and subscribe to his channel. Thanks for joining me, Omegon.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
And thank you for your time.